Have you ever been part of a group project where you felt like, oh my goodness, I would be better off doing this alone? Or maybe you felt like folks took on the wrong roles. The person who signed up to be the leader was struggling to see the big picture, the larger vision. The person who signed up to do the data analysis was making a lot of mistakes and not detail oriented. And it just feels like folks were not playing to their strengths. Well, chances are that maybe they were not playing to their strengths because they were not working to leverage the way that they think. And this is why I wanted to bring up today's episode, which is all about top-down versus bottom-up thinking. Welcome to the top global ranked and award-nominated Grad School Femtoring Podcast, the place for first-gen BIPOCs to listen in on conversations about grad school and growth. In this podcast, you'll learn about all things higher education, personal development, and sustainable productivity. This is Doctora Yvette Martinez-Vu, and I will be serving as your Femtor, providing you with tips and tricks and everything else you need to know to successfully navigate grad school and beyond. For over 14 years, I've been empowering first-gen students of color along their personal and professional journeys, and I'm really excited to support you too. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. This is your host, Doctora Yvette, and like I mentioned earlier, this episode is all about top-down versus bottom-up thinking. This might be a completely new set of concepts for you to learn, but I'm bringing it up for you to introduce you to it and to see how it might be beneficial to you in your learning, in your way of doing work, in your way for even advocating for yourself when you're doing work in relationship with others. So let's get started with defining what is bottom-up versus top-down thinking. So bottom-up thinking is really, in very, very oversimplified terms, being someone who starts with the details first. You start with the facts, you start with observations, and then you build up towards forming a bigger picture or a bigger vision. Bottom-up thinkers tend to be described as detail-oriented. They might prefer more concrete examples, and a lot of them excel at noticing patterns, anomalies, probably also work very, very well with data. So bottom-up thinkers, while they have their challenges and struggling to see the bigger picture, their strengths are they tend to be good with analysis. They tend to pay really great attention to detail. They may be really great in data-driven fields. I'm a bottom-up thinker, so for me, I have described myself as being pretty nitpicky at times. That can actually work in your favor in certain settings. The only thing is that you might, quote unquote, if you're thinking about a metaphor, miss the forest in focusing too much on the detail in the trees. So that's bottom-up thinking. Top-down thinking is someone who starts with a big picture, starts with a greater vision, can see the overarching picture. And then from there, they can break it down into the smaller, more detailed components. So they're more big picture folks, comfortable with abstract concepts. And they might also be very good at strategizing because they can see the big picture. So the strengths here is that, again, they can quickly grasp the bigger concepts. They can be pretty good at strategic thinking and planning. And this also tends to lend well in leadership and visionary roles, though I don't want to discount the fact that you can be a really great leader without having to be a top-down thinker. But going back to that metaphor about the trees, if you are a top-down thinker, you may miss the details, perhaps even important details in the trees, in focusing too much on the forest. So let me give you another example just to hopefully help ground this. And I'm also going to link one article in the show notes that's particularly great for autistic folks and or self-identified neurodivergent folks who may see themselves represented as a bottom-up thinker. If I describe what the bottom-up thinking is, and I will keep explaining it right now. But if you find yourself relating to this, check out that article. You'll gain a lot from it too. I am only introducing this concept to you, so I want you to do your own thorough research and see how it applies to you. None of what I say is ever supposed to be a prescriptive approach. I don't want you to think that, oh, just because I'm neurodivergent, I'm probably a bottom-up thinker, or the other way, just because I'm neurotypical, I'm a top-down thinker. That's not true. But there are studies that show that it's more common among autistic people to be bottom-up thinkers. So I'll just leave you with that. So do your additional research. Of course, always take what I say with a grain of salt. I share it with you so that you can do your own additional investigation. And so that if anything I share is helpful, you take it with you and run. And whatever isn't, then that's okay. You don't have to apply it. You don't have to even keep listening. But for those of y'all that are intrigued, let's keep going with this idea of like, how do I describe bottom-up thinking versus top-down thinking in an example? I'm thinking about the example of working on a quilt. Let's say you decide you want to work on a quilt for a friend. If you are a bottom-up thinker, odds are you probably don't have the picture of what the quilt will look like as a whole, but you can tell and you can be very specific about the details for one patch that's going to be part of the greater quilt. So it won't be until you start building the quilt that you start to see the bigger picture. A top-down thinker will have the entire idea of what the quilt looks like at the outset, like just from the beginning. They'll know what it looks like. And then based on that bigger picture, they can go in and start to work on each of the patches. I hope that helps to concretize these concepts for you a little bit more. So why does this matter? Because I don't want you wasting your time, right? Why should you care about it? I am going to say this. In a lot of professional and academic settings, the way that things are set up for your learning, for your projects, for getting things done is catered to top-down thinkers. What do I mean by this? I mean that a lot of times, how many times have you been asked as a college student to write an essay and then you are encouraged, maybe even required to write an outline first? How many times as a grad student have you been asked to write an abstract for a paper that you have yet to write? Every single PhD student who's trying to become a candidate who is in a field where you're working on a dissertation, you're probably going to be asked to write a dissertation prospectus or a dissertation proposal. And if you have struggled with these things, if you have told yourself, how am I supposed to write this thing when I haven't written the entire dissertation? How am I supposed to outline my paper when I haven't written the paper? How am I supposed to write the thesis if I don't know what I'm writing about yet? Then you might be a bottom-up thinker. And again, I just want to say, I understand the struggle because I am a bottom-up thinker too. And that I don't want you to feel like there is something wrong with you if you feel like you can relate to it. It just means that, again, these milestones, these requirements, projects, things that we're working on tend to be catered more towards top-down thinkers. But no matter what, you're always going to have this way of thinking, and it's going to influence the way that you approach your tasks, your projects. So why not learn more about it so that then it can better influence the way that you communicate your needs, the way that you collaborate with others? And here's where I'm going to bring a recent example, and it's also going to be a bit of a shout out, to my colleague and a little bit of a promo for a workshop that I have going on. So I am starting to do these collaborative workshops with folks where I'm bringing in someone I know who I respect and admire to co-host the workshop with me. And I've collaborated with folks before. Hello, I co-edited an anthology with 4 other fierce Chicana mama scholars. I co-authored a book with my own femtor, who's a professor. And so now I enjoy collaborating. I'm gonna be doing these workshops, and my first one is a workshop with my colleague and friend, Camila Lax Zapien, and she is also a Chicana coach. She also works with folks and helping them with the graduate admissions process, but she does work beyond that. She is a hype woman. She is a very spiritual person. She is highly skilled with words and also with helping you to identify your story. So we're teaming up and leaning into each other's strengths. And guess what? As we were doing some planning around the workshop, we both realized, whoa, the way we're coming at this workshop is so different. We think so differently. Our brains function so differently. And instead of me trying to do things the way that she wants to do them, her trying to fit into the way that I do things, we're leaning on each other's strengths. And that's actually going to inform how we're giving this workshop. So our workshop is all about how your confidence is inevitable and teaching about storytelling and systems to ultimately achieve your goals, achieve your dreams, take action on your wildest desires. And of course, surprise, surprise, it's not a surprise. She's covering the storytelling piece because she can see the vision. And I am covering the systems piece because I am very good at execution. And this is just a little bit of again, promo for the workshop. For those of y'all that want to learn more and maybe want to sign up for the workshop, we are hosting this workshop on August 20th at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And if you want to learn more, you can go to my website, gradschoolfemtoring.com/links. That's where I have a bunch of links to the most relevant stuff that I'm doing. And the second link on there is all about signing up for this workshop. But I brought this up to her when we were having this planning session about, I'm pretty sure that you're a top-down thinker, just the way that you can envision this at the outset. And I needed more details. I was like, no, like let's hash out X, Y, and Z so that way I could have the bigger picture. So anyway, long story short, whether you are a bottom-up thinker or a top-down thinker, you have a way that you do things. And sometimes in trying to mold yourself or trying to have yourself assimilate or fit into this box that is not meant for someone who thinks like you, it can make things really challenging. That's why so many folks actually don't end up getting past that ABD, all but dissertation stage, because they're not receiving the support that they need. They might not know how to advocate for themselves to get that support so that they can do things in the way that work for them and ultimately finish and file their dissertations. So I hope that this was a very long explanation of why this might matter to you. So now I want to go into, if you're not sure up to this point, which is your way of thinking, then here are some other ways that you can try to identify them. And then after that, I'll talk about some strategies for working with your way of thinking if you're bottom-up thinker or top-down thinker. But in terms of identifying it, you want to do some self-reflection. Think about your past successes and past challenges. And what have been your preferred learning methods, your preferred ways of working with others? Are you able to seek feedback? Sometimes in asking for feedback, people will tell you, oh, I see that you're very detail-oriented. Or they might say, oh, you're really good at coming up with a vision. So asking for feedback, reflecting on your past successes and challenges, both in professional and personal settings. And then again, read that article that I'm going to post in the show notes to see what you gain from it. I know that I'm not 100% sure where I learned about top-down or bottom-up thinking. It might have been from one of my client sessions. I have more than one client. I actually have a couple of clients who specialize in researching neurodivergent populations. And I've learned a thing or two just from supporting them, learning more about their research. And it might have been one of my clients who does research on neurodivergent students and their use of AI. I think she might have introduced me to this concept. I might be wrong. Again, y'all know my memory. If you've been a long-time listener, I have a terrible working short and long-term memory. So whoever it was that introduced me to this, if you're listening, thank you so much. And also remind me that you were the one that introduced me to it so I can give you the proper recognition. So yeah, just know this is a really helpful concept. At least it has been for me, because it was an aha moment of revealing to me, wow, this is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but this is one of the reasons why I struggled so badly in college and in grad school. And this is actually something that comes up too, because, from K through 12, you get a lot of support, especially for neurodivergent folks. Again, even if you may not be diagnosed, there's a lot of support in your executive functioning skills that's provided. There's a lot of scaffolding, breaking things down into baby steps. And if you are diagnosed with any kind of learning need and you get assessed, you might have an IEP, you might have a 504 plan, and it is the school's responsibility to provide you with the supports you need to have an equal education. It's in the law. They're supposed to provide you with support to get an education. Whereas in college, we have the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, but we don't have the same type of supports legally for folks to get the accommodations they need to survive and thrive in college and beyond. So a lot of folks kind of get lost in the shuffle in that process, where it's up to them to advocate for themselves instead of their teachers or their parents advocating for them like they did in the past. All of this to say that I know this sounds like a bit of a side note, but for me, this is not just an issue of what is the way that you think. It's also an issue of advocacy, especially for my neurodivergent listeners, because a lot of us, like I to this day, do not have a formal diagnosis. I'm saving up my money so that I can afford to get a formal diagnosis. I know enough from being a parent of a child who has a formal neurodivergence diagnosis. I know enough from my spouse. I know enough from my clients. I know enough from my own research to comfortably self-identify. But yeah, this has been a very revelatory period for me. From, I would say in the last 7 years, have been pretty transformative of kind of leaning into my neurodivergence, or just my different way of thinking. And the bottom-up thinking is one of the ways that I see that sometimes my thinking differs from some people around me, not from everyone, but from some people. Now, let's say you are a bottom-up thinker and you don't feel like you're being supported in college, grad school, or even in your work setting. What can you do for yourself? I would say try to break things down. Break down your large goals into smaller tasks, create action plans, ask for clear, detailed instructions, ask for templates so you can get a sense of what the big picture looks like. Use mind mapping tools. I know I did this a lot when I was writing my dissertation. I used mind mapping tools to get a sense of the different concepts that were coming up in my writing. Leverage your pattern recognition skills, because you're really good with the nitty-gritty details. Start to notice patterns. That means look for trends in your data, in your behavior. So the way you're really good with details and data, you could also use that to your benefit in studying yourself and what works for you. And then, of course, collaborate and seek input from top-down thinkers. I have benefited so much from my collaborations and from learning from others. And so I definitely recommend working with others and leaning into each other's strengths. Now, I don't want to leave the top-down thinkers completely without support, even though y'all already get more support than we do. So top-down thinkers, that was not shade. I have a lot of love for, my top-down thinkers too. Y'all teach me a lot. So top-down thinkers, what can you do? if you feel like you want to leverage this to the best that you can. Definitely lean into your big picture thinking. Create your mission statement. Create a vision statement. Create a vision board. Like, go all out. Think as big as you can because the sky's the limit. Also, lean into using your strength of being really good with conceptual frameworks and bring that into your work, especially if you're doing research, but even not, bring it into your work if it feels good to you. Create high-level outlines for projects. If that works for you, keep at it. And of course, practice the summarizing of complex info because you are a big visionary. Then odds are you might be able to go on and on and on about your vision, but start to practice doing this in shorter timeframes, like an elevator pitch, so that you can summarize this big picture in a way that is more digestible to all kinds of thinkers. And then, of course, like I said, for bottom-up thinkers, you, as a top-down thinker, can also benefit a lot from collaborating with bottom-up thinkers. So find ways to work with other folks and to identify each other's strengths and to make the most of them. So that's it for what I wanted to talk about today. I know I went into a couple of tangents. I hope that this made sense to you because I had a couple of notes, but I really went off the cuff with this one. At the end of the day, I want you to have a better sense of what your thinking style is. Are you a bottom-up thinker like me? Are you a top-down thinker? I want you to think about what are new ways that I can approach completing projects, whether that's a group project at work or an abstract for a paper you're writing, or maybe even the prospectus of your dissertation. Ask yourself, what are new ways that I can experiment with approaching this work that might lean into my way of thinking? And yeah, just keep advocating for yourself to get the support that you need based on what you've learned about how you think and how you do things. That's it for this episode. I hope y'all found it helpful. And as always, I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye. Thanks so much for joining me in the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. If you like what you heard, here are 4 ways you can support the show. The first is to make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you email me a screenshot, I'll send you a surprise freebie. The second way is to get your copy of my free Grad School Femtoring Resource Kit, which includes essential information to prepare for and navigate grad school. You can access it at the link in today's show notes. The third way to support my show is to follow me on social media. You can find me on Instagram with the handle @GradSchoolFemtoring and on LinkedIn by searching my name. The last way to show your love is to order a copy of Is Grad School for Me?, my graduate school admissions book for first-gen BIPOCs. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.